Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Enabling Social Supports for Humanitarian Migrants, produced by APES Child Family Community Australia Information Exchange, which is funded by the Department of Social Services. My name is John DeMeo. I'm the Manager of Quantitative Data in the Family Law, Family Violence and Elder Abuse team here at APES. And in a previous role, I was managing the Building a New Life in Australia study, a large-scale longitudinal study of recently arrived humanitarian migrants. Before starting, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which I'm meeting today. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Today, we're talking about the role that social supports play in supporting the well-being of humanitarian migrants upon resettlement. And in this webinar, when we refer to humanitarian migrants, we mean those who have arrived in Australia as either refugees or asylum seekers. We've pulled together a diverse panel of speakers that will share their insights and reflections on the research and practice related to this topic. I'd like to introduce Vani Doma, a research officer at Monash University. Welcome, Vani.
Hi.
Andrea Shepherd, a senior practitioner who works in community development in the southeast region of Victoria. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, John.
Blaise Itabello, who brings over 10 years of experience in community engagement and development.
Hi, everyone.
And works alongside our next speaker, Lisa Button, CEO of Community Refugee Sponsorship Australia. Welcome,
Hi,
Blaise
everyone.
and Lisa. And thanks everyone for joining us online today. Today, we're wanting to explore what we mean by the concept of social supports, why it's important, and ways practitioners can support recently arrived humanitarian migrants build both social and community connections. So I think we'll kick off the discussion by first looking at what we mean by social and community supports and why they are important. So Vani, can you tell us a little bit about what your research showed and how you define social supports?
Thanks, John. Well, my research used a well-established framework to define social support as an exchange of resources, assistance, and aid through social interactions. So this framework conceptually differentiated social support into 4 different types, which you'll find I've listed on slide 2 of the handout. So the 4 types are emotional support, which refers to expressions of care, comfort, and empathy in social interactions. Instrumental support, which refers to involves providing aid, assistance, and service to another individual. Informational support, which involves providing suggestions, advice, and new information to another individual. And finally, appraisal support, which refers to communicating information that is important for self-evaluation, like constructive feedback. So these support types are often provided by our social networks, such as family, friends, and community.
Thanks, Vani. Great to hear those insights. I'd also like the opportunity to bring in the other panelists here. Just wondering, Lisa, might start with you, and if you had anything to add about social supports and connections.
Yeah, thanks, John and Vani. I just wanted to add in one observation that often when we start talking about social supports, we start to talk about the concept of community. And in our work, it's become important to really tease apart what we mean by community. People tend to use that term quite loosely with their own meaning ascribed to it. We can have communities of identity, in terms of people who identify as being from a particular ethnic or linguistic or religious group. We can have communities based around location. We can have communities based around shared kinship. And you know, in the sense that we use the term, we're often talking about the community in the broadest possible sense, the people around us who we're proximate to, but we break through all those different boundaries. So just wanted to throw that out there as something to bear in mind.
That's great, thanks. Vani, I thought I might just circle back to you as well, and if you were happy to discuss a little bit about your main findings in relation to the relationship between social supports and mental health outcomes for humanitarian migrants.
Sure, thank you, John. So to provide some background, so my research used data collected from the Building New Life in Australia longitudinal study to look at the relationship between 3 different kinds of social support and mental health of a large cohort of humanitarian migrants at multiple times after resettlement in Australia. So the three types that I looked at were emotional, instrumental, and informational support. So on slide 3 of the handout, you can see that overall we found that among the whole sample population included in the study, as emotional and instrumental support that was received within the initial months of resettlement increased, psychological distress decreased 3 years after resettlement. And on slide 4, you can see that as informational support received 3 years after resettlement increased, psychological distress decreased after 5 years. So this shows that being supported emotionally and in performing tasks such as buying groceries is vital in the initial phases of resettlement. But being self-sufficient, so knowing how to find a job, access bank services, use public transport is crucial for longer-term mental health. My research also analyzed groups of humanitarian migrants at different outcomes and the mental health outcomes as well. And you find those on slides 5 to 8 of the handout. So first, informational support influenced the severity of psychological distress of both women and men at different times after resettlement. So I found that women receiving informational support in the initial months of resettlement was associated with less psychological distress after 5 years. However, for men, informational support that was received 3 years after resettlement was associated with less psychological distress after 5 years. So I also found the relationship varied amongst age groups. So for those 18 to 29 years old, emotional and instrumental support that was received in the initial months of resettlement led to a decrease in psychological distress after 3 years of resettlement. However, for those older, so those between 45 to 75 years old, it was more informational support that was received in the initial months of resettlement that led to less psychological distress after 5 years. So these findings demonstrate that different subgroups of humanitarian migrants have different support needs after resettlement. And these findings are currently under review, and we hope to see it published soon.
That's great. Thank you. It's really great to hear those perspectives from the BNLA and the relationship between social supports and psychological distress. I'd now like to throw it over to Lisa and Blaise, and hoping you could introduce us to the concept of community sponsorship and tell us what you see are the main challenges and gaps in achieving social connectedness among recently arrived humanitarian migrants.
Thanks, John and Barney. Those findings are really interesting. It's great to see your research in this space. Before I get into addressing those specific questions, we thought we might just share a 2-minute video which really shows what this concept of community sponsorship looks like in practice. Now, you'll have to bear with us in that this video was developed as a promotional tool, so it's not aimed so much at practitioners as the general public who we're hoping to get involved in this approach.
Do you want to work with others in your local community to welcome a refugee family to Australia in a practical, rewarding and hands-on way?
Actually, Matt said to me, you know, instead of whinging about it, why don't you do something? That's why I thought I'd reach out and find out about the program.
For me, it was the same thing, wondering what you could do that would make any sort of difference. And the fantastic thing about this is that it's so immediate.
Ordinary people had to step up and do something tangible.
If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to help a couple of families settle in. I've been quite amazed at how much is involved in just kind of getting established.
You can hear things over the news, but it's a very different scene when you're meeting people and you're actually relating to what's happening in their lives. We're part of a wider world, and the wider world is pretty beautiful with lovely people in it.
Join a growing movement of people from across Australia and the world in creating opportunities to welcome refugees into more of our communities.
Often when you want to do some voluntary work, you've got to commit to a particular day a week or something, and this is so flexible and takes advantage of the skills that you've got.
When we found the group, we thought, now we have family here.
You get a group of essentially disparate group of people together, and they've got all the skills necessary to look after these people. They need something, somebody can find it, you know, it's just been fantastic.
The important support we received, the emotional support.
It is really such a privilege for us to be able to get involved and help navigate that life, what that looks like in an Australian context.
My world has become much more colourful, a little bit busier, and a whole lot more bigger.
Be part of the change you want to see. Visit our website, refugeesponsorship.org.au, to find out more.
So Community Refugee Sponsorship Australia, we're a national and independent Australian charity. We've been around in various forms for the last 4 years, initially as a advocacy and research organisation trying to persuade the Australian government and the Australian community to get on board with this idea of community sponsorship. But in the last couple of years, we've moved that into running programs, initially a group mentor program for newly arrived refugees. And more recently, we've been funded by the federal government to run what I'd describe as a more full community sponsorship program inspired by the very successful Canadian community refugee sponsorship program that's been running for more than 40 years. A lot of people have heard about the Canadian program, but for those who haven't, that program has enabled everyday citizens in Canada to sponsor the migration of more than 325,000 refugees into Canada in the last 40 years, in addition to those who are arriving through the government-funded program, which is sort of similar to what Australia has had in recent decades. So as an organisation, we want to see that kind of approach developing and scaling up in a way that expands and improves refugee resettlement in Australia. And the key to this is harnessing the generosity, goodwill and social capital of groups of everyday Australians and community groups. And when we talk about community, we're usually talking in the broadest possible sense about the people who live in a particular location who can walk the journey that a refugee newcomer experiences when they arrive in the country and help shepherd them through that process and help them to build their own independence and give voice to their own wishes and agency as part of that program. So look, there's a few sort of principles that really underpin what we do in this space, but I'd say the key is that it's very much a group-based approach. So it's not about one person sponsoring or working with another person. It's about a group of everyday citizens who have expertise in their own lives and in their own professions and in their own local community, working with a single refugee newcomer family and supporting them in their journey to become fully established members of the Australian community. It's about an informal and organic relationship that underpins the settlement support that group provides to the newcomer family. Sometimes it becomes friendship, not always, but it's often described in terms of friendship. But the key to it is informal, it is organic, even though you might have some sort of key expectations around the type of support that group might be providing. And the idea is that these groups of these informal groups of people are very self-directed in their work. So they don't get told, you know, on a Tuesday afternoon you have to do driving lessons, and on a Wednesday morning you have to do English classes. The brief is basically get to know the family, find out what they need, and then support them in achieving that in whatever way you and that family deem appropriate and find workable and successful. So it's whole of family, whole of life approach, and typically the support period goes for 6 to 12 months. I'm going to now hand over to my wonderful colleague Blaise, who can talk a little bit more about some of the gaps and how this approach addresses those gaps in social support for newly arrived refugees.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks, John, for the introduction. I guess, as we all know, starting a new life in a new country is never easy. You know, there are challenges that comes with migration, and obviously, when we're talking about refugees and migrant, there are those challenges that comes with starting a new life in a new country, and like languages, learning a new culture, getting to know someone in your community. But when it comes to really looking at our current settlement program, which I tend to call our traditional settlement program, that comes with there is no systematic opportunity for newly arrived members of our community or newly arrived refugees to meet members of the broader community. You know, there is no opportunity for someone who arrives today to really get to know John and Blaise, who lives within their same geographical area. The focus on the mainstream settlement program is on registration and need basis. So really, it's all about, you know, someone responding to the needs of the client when the needs arise. And I guess the biggest out of all is the structural aspect of the professional settlement. This is the settlement service is often done within, you know, working hours by a professional case manager, and you know, it's done Monday to Friday. And there are some very strict boundaries in terms of what they can and can't do, like any other workplace. So that really brings a little bit of a challenge in terms of you know, the inability of case managers to go beyond what is written in the book. And what we'll see as an end result is really the lack of a framework to systematically bring newcomers and establish Australians together in ways that foster natural, organic, meaningful and holistic relationships and the development and or transfer of social capital. Now, we'll talk very briefly about our two flagship programs, and Lisa kind of touched base on this. I will be very brief on this. Our first program that Lisa mentioned, this was started as a pilot program and is called the GMP, Group Mentorship Program. This is very light touch program, and the way the program runs is that the refugee is already in Australia, so and the group will just provide that you know, light touch support with supplementary supplement support, because the family has already got a case manager through the government funded program. And as I said, early refugees will already be in Australia accessing humanitarian settlement program. Then the group will just provide a mentorship and the additional support. If I look on the other end, the CRISP, this is our new program, and we've just launched it in May, and we are very excited, and I should maybe say this very quickly, we're very excited to be expecting our first family, our first refugee that will come through this program on the 1st of September. The way this program works is that, again, maybe I should just potentially put it this way, the way program works is that a group will come together and support a family, and we'll come back to that, but the program is what we call a full settlement support. The group will provide support from the date of arrival. So the expectation is that Blaise is coming from a refugee camp in Congo. He's already connected to John and Lisa, who lives in, you know, in Sydney, and they will be at the airport. So they're their first point of contact when they arrive in the country. And these people, or the refugees that are coming in the program, they will already have a visa that has been granted through UNHCR and the Department of Immigration. And what the group will provide is that holistic support throughout 12 months of the arrival of the refugees when they come in Australia. I should say both our two programs, they all focus on bringing locals, everyday Australians together, a group of 5 people to provide that support. And the expectation is that the group will only give at least 10+ hours a week to provide that practical support. There are elements of fundraising in both two programs, and I must say the fundraising is not for CRISA. The fundraising is for the group to be able to really support the family they are looking after. We've seen success throughout these two programs, and as Lisa mentioned, the CRISP program started in Canada, and over 300,000 people have been settled through that program. We know that through the gaps that I mentioned earlier, these two approaches can actually bring a solution to some of those challenges that newly arrived refugees are facing when they arrive in Australia. As we said, group of individuals in the same geographical area supporting one newly arrived household. So this is really Blaise and Lisa that lives in the area and brings that person in that area and providing them with that holistic support. Because it's a group of 5, it's not like the traditional settlement support where a single caseworker is actually supporting numerous families. This is just 5 people supporting one household and giving in at least 10 hours a week, 10+ hours a week. The program is very flexible, holistic, and organic. The nature of support can change day to day. So if John today needs this, the group is there. and the 5 people bring different expertise, different availability that makes it easy in supporting the individual. It's not just about the head of the household. The support goes throughout to the whole family. The general social support to build the social capital and supporting particular settlement goals. And we see things like someone arrives here, you know, the group will pass on the knowledge of local services. The group will act as their mentors, and that will give them an opportunity of practicing their English. And we have also seen professional networks and knowledge of employment opportunities coming out of that. So, having said that, you're probably wondering, so what is it for me, or how can I get involved? What can I do? I think the first thing I can say, just be aware of the program, as your future client or your next client could be involved in this program. Most of our programs are new, and we're still looking at reaching out to everyday Australians, and we believe through your network, we could be able to reach out to more people. So please help us spread the news. If you are, if you've got a mailing list that usually goes out, we would love to put an article in there that can reach out to your audience. Please join our mailing list, and and share emails, follow us on social media. There are ways of getting involved in your private life. You can really do this, and I want to take this time to invite you. We've got an information session on the 17th of August. There is a link there in the handout. Please click there and register. And one thing I would really love to say as well is we do actually have a community of practice, and this brings together people that are involved in this program to share the expertise, to really support one another. And if you think you've got the expertise that can really benefit that community of practice, we would like to hear from you. The next slide is just there for my contact. If you would like to hear more, or if you have a group that would like to hear more, happy to be contacted, happy to come and deliver a tailored presentation to your group. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Blaise. And Lisa? Oh, sorry, you're going to say something, Lisa?
I just wanted to add that our mission here is to work alongside colleagues who are working in the traditional settlement services sector. There's a lot of wonderful people doing great work in that area. But as Blaise's presentation highlighted, there are obviously, boundaries when you're doing that work for an organisation as a staff member rather than in a private capacity. So we want to see this approach growing refugee settlement in Australia by bringing in private actors alongside of professional settlement service, and see the whole thing creating an Australia that can do more for refugees and provides them with a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. It was really great to hear about that new settlement model and the benefits it's actually going to provide to both the migrants and the sponsors. So thank you for that. Andrea, I might circle back to you now. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about your own experience working with these communities, and what do you see as the challenges they face in achieving social connections?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think if we think about, I guess, the basics and going back to basic needs and thinking about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the need for shelter and clothing and food, I think that really takes priority. Social connections, I guess, friendships, they kind of sit in that middle tier, and keeping in mind we're focusing on humanitarian migrants, so they can face significant barriers to just meeting those basic needs. So then everything sort of gets pushed down that priority list as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But I'd also like to kind of flip this conversation a little bit as well, and get us all to really think about what are we doing to enable social connections. I think, as Lisa and Blaise have presented around their programs, that's one way. And also just for all of us working in organisations, like, are we doing everything we can to promote social connections? So how are we promoting our programs in a culturally safe or appropriate manner? Do we have flyers that are translated? Are we using imagery that's that's inclusive and representative as well? Are we minimising those barriers for participation in terms of, is the venue close to public transport? Are we providing childcare if that's necessary? Are there interpreters available? I think we need to keep in mind that we're the service providers, and if we take that rights-based approach as well to our work, our programs need to be inclusive, and so we as a service as well as an organisation can improve how we enable and minimise those barriers for community.
Thanks, Andrea. Great to hear those insights also. And Vani, I'm just wondering, is this shortage of social supports also evidenced in your research?
Yeah, so thanks, John. And I guess just to add on to what Andrea was speaking about, we have seen in my research that there's been shortages of social support in different subgroups. So among the 3 support types that my research looked at, so emotional, instrumental, and informational support, we found that subgroups of humanitarian migrants received varying levels of support at all times that were measured after resettlement, so which spanned 5 years. So these levels of support were measured in the initial months of resettlement, 3 years after resettlement, and 5 years after resettlement. And you'll see a breakdown of this in the handout on slides 9 and 10. So we found that older humanitarian migrants received less of all 3 support types at each time point that was measured after resettlement compared to younger humanitarian migrants. We also found that women received less informational support, but more emotional and instrumental support at all times after resettlement compared to men. Humanitarian migrants with 12 or more years of education received more informational support, but less emotional and instrumental support at all times after resettlement. And this was compared to those with 6 or fewer years of education. And overall, we found that those with higher English proficiency received more of each support type than those with lower English proficiency. Those reliant on government payments as their main source of income received less informational support than those who earned a salary through employment. And finally, we found that humanitarian migrants who resided in regional Australia received more emotional and instrumental support within the initial months of resettlement than those who resided in major cities.
Thanks, Vani. So now I just want to talk a little bit about how we can facilitate community connections in practice. And Andrea, I know you work directly in community capacity building, and some of which is focused on obviously building connections. So it'd be great to hear from you a few examples of how community connections were facilitated at Southeast Community Links and what the impact of these were.
Yeah, definitely, John. Thank you. So I have a couple of examples I can share with everyone. I'll start with one of them where we have developed recently a group program that was initially sort of focused around building women's digital literacy skills. So looking at developing, their confidence in using digital devices like laptops or their smartphones, because really that feedback from the community came in terms of that digitalization of services, things like they need to access Centrelink or even school communication these days. It's all through an app. But keeping that in mind, we also wanted to consider other feedback in terms of community members saying how they were feeling isolated and alone. They didn't have a lot of opportunities to come out of the house, particularly for women in the community. So taking all of that into consideration, we developed a program after that feedback from community in particular around developing this program where we didn't have a really sort of, I guess, rigid structure in terms of making sure that we needed to, have a particular curriculum in place. While we recognise the importance of, I guess, building those skills and the confidence, we also recognise the importance of building connection amongst the women. And given that we allowed space for that to happen, so giving opportunity while, the focus was about building digital literacy skills, that they still had opportunity to talk about things that are relevant to them, issues that they may be experiencing, and learn from one another as well, sharing those resources about what they've learnt through their experience and their settlement so far. So it was about minimising that rigidity in the program and giving space to allow that connection to organically happen amongst the group as well. And following on from that, we of course do evaluations and feedback, and it was really, fantastic that while I guess originally the intention may not have been to build that social or that connection, we recognise that that was still valuable, and that's what strongly came back through their evaluation as well of the program, that all of the participants were saying how they felt more connected, they felt more included in community as well through their participation in that program. So that's one example. And I guess taking again that community development approach and framework, we also work quite closely and in partnership with ethno-specific associations. So those organisations that may have established themselves to support their own community, we work alongside them. So I think, again, they will identify a need or an issue in their particular community. So one example is a community group recognised that older women were quite isolated and needed that opportunity to connect with others and also connect with services as well, because we recognise service literacy is another huge issue. But in doing so, the group proposed the idea of having a craft group that also incorporated English, but that group didn't have the resourcing, the funding, the space to be able to allow that to happen. So that's where we partnered with them together, and through our connections, applied for local funding through the local council to enable that to happen, provided support around administration, finding that venue as well. So that enabled the group to happen and occur. And again, the women sort of said, for some of them, they hadn't left their homes since they arrived in Australia. That was that first opportunity where they were able to connect with others and also have that, shared experience of, oh, wow, someone else has also been through this experience. So I think partnership with those ethno-specific associations was another really great way to enable that to happen. We also have a mentoring program that we established, and that was again established through a co-design effort. So it was meeting with community and asking them, okay, what is particularly firstly preventing or what were the barriers to engaging with employment and education? And a lot of people sort of said that that was because they didn't have anyone to really explain or talk through about what were the different pathways available. And so this co-design group, they suggested having a mentoring program where someone could be connected to someone in the broader community who can provide that sort of guidance and support on that individual basis, understand what are the goals that that individual wants to achieve, and then work with them towards that. And so that, again, while it had that focus around education and employment, it also provided that real valuable opportunity to build a friendship, expand their networks, gain opportunities within different workplaces as well. So that really enabled sort of that more holistic support in addressing those different domains of someone's life in terms of education, employment, health, housing. That mentor sort of provided that support and connection. So that's just a few examples there, John, of how we've been able to do that across our organisation.
Thanks. And obviously the last example you gave there's some parallels with the new community support sponsorship model that Lisa and Blaise were talking about as well. So one of the questions from our pre-registration for the webinar was around how we encourage people to attend workshops in a community centre setting like those that you facilitate. So I'm just wondering, do you have any reflections from these initiatives and what practitioners can do to enable these social supports?
Yeah, certainly, John. And I think this sort of comes back to a point I raised earlier in terms of, I guess, one of the first things I'd encourage people to do is just understand are there any barriers that are preventing people from participating or attending those workshops or groups? Is it about childcare? Is it about the timing of it? That can be something really simple. Is it at a convenient time for people? And how is it being promoted? Are we ensuring that, again, it's in different languages, or the imagery that we use on our flyers, does it represent the community we're trying to engage? And is there language support available as well in that? And I think a couple of other things people could also consider is about whether you have capacity to bring on board someone from the community or the target group that you're focusing that particular program on. So reaching out to those people and saying, okay, can you partner with us? Can you work with us to try and engage others from the community? a couple of things that are really, really simple and really practical ways, I think, as well, of encouraging that is something I know that we get asked quite often at our programs is, will I get a certificate if I come? And I think that's sort of that acknowledgement of people's time. People are time poor. And so just providing something simple like that, which then again, I guess it supports and acknowledges their time and their commitment to that particular initiative. And the other really simple thing is providing food. We know that food just has such a fabulous way of bringing people together, and people need to eat at the end of the day. So I think those are two simple, practical ways as well to encourage that engagement.
Thanks. So at this point, I might just throw it open to the other panelists. And what do you see as the key considerations when working with humanitarian migrants and supporting them to build these connections? And Vani, I might start with you. And if you just want to talk a little bit about any implications from your research on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. Well, my research findings demonstrated that humanitarian migrant populations are not homogeneous, meaning that different groups will have different experiences and therefore they will have different support needs at various times after resettling. So I think to address these findings, I think we can start by investing more in resettlement services to ensure that they provide the support that are reflective of the needs of the humanitarian migrants that are being resettled in Australia. And we could also tailor services so that subgroups are provided the support at the right time after resettlement and for a longer period than what is currently being provided.
Great, thanks for that. And Blaise, do you have anything you wanted to add on this topic as well?
Yeah, I think, thanks, John. I think I agree with Vani and Andrea in terms of your contribution on some of the things that can be done. And I think for me, it starts with the program. It starts with the activity you are putting up there. Is that an activity that the humanitarian entrant will be interested in? Because you may be struggling to get people just because what you're proposing is not what they need. When someone comes in this country, their needs are different. So if someone who's been here within 3 months, taking them to set 3 in something may not be something they want. They just want to know where they can take their kids to this and that. So I think that's the number one. But number two is all about understanding the people you want to bring. Because, and Andrea did put some good point here. You want to target humanitarian entrant. Do you understand who they are? Do you understand what sort of cultural background you really want to bring in your door? Do you understand their needs? Do you understand what they're interested in? That will shape how you promote the program. That will shape what you actually present to them. That will shape how you actually market the whole endeavor. And I think that's another key ingredient to success. Thank you.
Thanks. And Lisa, do you have any reflections on this topic?
Only just to reinforce, I think what other speakers have said, but at an individual level, it's one thing to try and understand people as a cohort. It's another thing to recognise the nuances in each individual. And one of the things that we do in our training is this. I'm sure you're familiar with it, this idea of a cultural iceberg, and who are we culturally speaking? And it's influenced by so many different factors. And so culturally speaking, even people from a similar language group or religious group may still have a lot of differences in their culture, in their needs and in their aspirations. And that can be very hard for large programs to accommodate and tackle, but nevertheless, I think it should be an aspiration wherever possible to try and allow the individuals that we're trying to support to, I guess, shape and choose their own adventure a bit rather than having a lot of assumptions made about what they need at an individual level.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for that very stimulating discussion. It was great to hear both the perspectives from the research and practice side of things. So now we might just go to some live questions from the audience. And firstly, I was just going to ask, do you think we need to identify and tailor our practice to this population? Or do we change our practice so that everyone feels welcome? I know we've touched on this a little bit throughout the discussion as well.
I think I can jump in there.
Thanks, Andrea.
John, yeah, I think So I think it's really important that we do take an intersectional lens and approach to this. So keeping in mind that obviously there are sort of different aspects of a person's identity that can expose them to sort of, you know, different overlapping levels of discrimination and marginalisation and privilege as well. So if we apply that lens to, I think, our work, I would say that we do need to tailor our practice, and it isn't necessarily about excluding people or not making people welcome, but I guess recognising that there are additional barriers for people to be able to participate. So how can we minimise those or remove those?
Thanks. I'm not sure. Blaise, you want to say something as well?
Yeah, look, if I can just add to that, Andrea, I think in today's age, I think we need to look at how we can make our services more accessible, with anyone, regardless of their background, the challenges they may be going through. And I think for any service, I think it's okay if you've got a specific program that you really want to target specifically newly arrived refugees. I think you really need to tailor that program specifically for them. But I think if you've got a service and you really want to see a diverse range of customers or client or patients on the door, I think it's about taking a step back where you ask yourself, well, if someone walks in here who doesn't speak English, how are we going to respond to their needs? If someone walks in here and needs Auslan translation, how are we going to respond to their needs? I think it is taking that approach to that level, and both refugees and people with other challenges will be able to access the services.
Thanks. And we've got a next question. This might be best for you, Andrea, but I'll throw it open to everyone as well. A member from a multicultural supported playgroup is trying to organise employment support for migrants. So do you have any info on sort of some of the pitfalls in your experience in setting this up, and what doesn't work so well or what might work well?
So employment support for humanitarian migrants?
Support, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think something to be considerate of is, and look, this particular organisation may have done this, but do a bit of service mapping as well. So what is already out there, what's already being done. You don't want to create something that's already happening. I know that employment support, there is such a focus from it through government funding. There's a real push on those 3 E's of English, education, employment. And so I think firstly exploring, is something already happening in our particular region? If it is happening, are there particular gaps there in terms of what they might not be addressing to provide that employment support that you might be able to fill as an organisation? I think it's about also providing that readiness support before even getting into employment. So do people understand the different pathways? Where can they find different jobs? Also, I guess, we talk about Australian culture. I don't like to use that very often, but in terms of in a workplace setting, what does that look like? Preparing them for that. So yeah, that's just some of my reflections.
And do any of the other panelists want to add anything there? No, all good. So the next question, I think this is definitely for Blaise and Lisa, is a member just wants to confirm that your program, it's not going to replace the support from the government HSP providers. It would be in addition, is that correct?
I might take that one. So the CRISP program, which is the one I think this question is referring to, was introduced. It was announced last year under the coalition government, and it's set up as a pilot. So it's relatively small, significant, but reasonably small in scale. It's 1,500 refugees over 4 years. At this stage, it's not additional to the general humanitarian quota. But for those familiar with the Albanese government's policy platform, or the ALP policy platform, there's a very clearly articulated aspiration that community-sponsored places will be additional, and an aspiration of building that to 5,000 places per annum, in addition to a larger government-funded humanitarian quota. So the idea is that they're parallel ways of supporting the settlement of people, and I think when you look at that, particularly through the prism of regional Australia, you can see the value of the two programs working alongside of each other. The community-sponsored approach is it can work anywhere, but it's particularly useful in areas where there is not a lot of existing settlement infrastructure, but where there are communities who wish to grow their populations, welcome people from diverse backgrounds, and so forth. And the other thing just to flag is that the HSP program, the Humanitarian Settlement Program, is there as a stopgap. So if for some reason there was a breakdown in the relationship between the local supporter group and the refugee family, there's a safety net of that individual getting support through the Humanitarian Settlement Program. And those individuals do also have access to some of the more specialised and intensive services on a case-by-case, needs-based basis. So it's a slightly nuanced answer to that question, but I hope that suffices.
And there's obviously a little bit of interest in the CRISP program, because there's also another question. So while we're sort of in that space, and there's CRISP support, can it be offered for unaccompanied minors in out-of-home care? Or is that
so that's an interesting question. In practice, the way it's working at the moment is the referrals are coming in through the UNHCR process. So they're identifying, as they do every year, refugees to refer to the Australian government for resettlement in Australia. Of that pool, a certain number are identified as potential candidates for participation in the CRISP. So it would depend on whether those individuals were being picked up from that through that process. In theory, that could work, but it would just rely on that sort of pipeline. And I would say that you know, it's a two-way process. So if we're hearing that there's appetite from suitable members of the community to support refugees with a particular profile, so whether they be unaccompanied minors or women at risk or refugees from the LGBTIQ community, we can be feeding that information back up through the government to say, hey, we've got some really strong community capacity to support someone from this background. If you can, filter people into the program who might benefit, then we can make that work at a matching level.
Great. And we've got one final question, then we'll probably have to wrap up. So what kind of community-based or volunteer organisations provide support to asylum seeker families who have lived in Australia for longer than 5 years? Does anyone have any insights on that question?
Can you repeat again the question, John? Sorry.
So they're interested in supports after the 5-year settlement period. So that's community-based or volunteer organisations that can support humanitarian migrants after they've been in Australia for 5 years or more.
I could answer that, John, in terms of, I guess, our region in the southern region of Victoria. I know that our neighbourhood houses provide fantastic support to people, and they don't have those strict, I guess, criteria or in terms or eligibility in terms of people needing to fit into within 5 years. So neighbourhood houses is one fantastic place I think we refer people to. Also the Community Information and Support Services, or CIS for short. Again, these are obviously Victorian based, but they're another agency again that would provide that. They provide crisis support, but also they can provide, I know, casework support as well for people who again may be finished with their 5-year support through the Humanitarian Settlement Program. So those are a couple that I can think of.
Blaze, you wanted to add something there as well?
If I can add, I think I've seen in Queensland and even in New South Wales, organizations like neighborhood groups, community centers, Salvation Army, and the rest tend to pick up that load, which it is actually quite heavy because it's often unfunded and it's relying on volunteers to take on the challenge. But the support is somehow there, and through faith groups as well. So churches and mosques tend to really step up in supporting people even after 5 years.
We have a few follow-up questions about the new CRIS program as well. And one of our members wants to know, is CRIS being rolled out Australia-wide?
Thanks, John. I think the best part and the most exciting thing about this program is that it's not actually designed to go in the traditional migration areas. So the program is open across Australia, and as we speak, we started getting interest from groups. So the way things will happen is that refugees will be matched with groups where those groups lives. So if the group lives in Wollongong, the refugee family will be going to Wollongong. So it is open across Australia, and the interest that we're receiving right now are coming from across Australia. So anywhere you are, whatever you are, anybody can come there. And I think, again, this brings that opportunity of a community to start their own migration program. A community that has never settled anybody before can now decide to say, we want to see our community diverse, and put their hands up to be part of the CRIS program.
Thanks, Blaise. And another one about CRIS. An audience member notes that it seems to be great when there are not other members from their cultural and linguistic background, so that in terms of location. However, in areas where there is community from their cultural and linguistic backgrounds, do you find that newly arrived refugees still want to connect individually with members of the wider community?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one in that from where we're sitting, there's no reason why members of the same cultural linguistic background couldn't be involved in, or in fact, instigate the formation of the groups who provide the support. I think a dream team of supporters would include members of that cultural and linguistic community, as well as members of the broader Australian community. And I think, as another answer to that question, what we've noticed in our initial pilot program is that it really comes down to the individual refugee. For some people, it's of great comfort to have the support of people from their own cultural and linguistic community. For others, they perhaps want to be part of a more multicultural society, or really want to work on developing their English, for example, as their primary aspiration, and feel that they're better doing that in a sort of immersive environment where they're forced to speak English. So it really just comes down to the individual and their preference. But in short, I think we should try to encourage both those specific communities as well as the broader community to get involved.
Thanks, Lisa. And a final one about CRIS. And how does accommodation support work for refugee families under the CRIS program?
I'll take that one. So essentially, the community supporter group is responsible for initially having temporary accommodation lined up for the family upon arrival. But then once the family is in the country and is able to participate in working with that group to find longer term accommodation, the idea is that they would move into their own independent accommodation as soon as possible. So initially it could be a hotel or an Airbnb, in the same way that humanitarian migrants generally might arrive in Australia, but then moving into rental accommodation as they look for that permanent place to call home.
Thanks, Lisa. Blaise, do you want to add something?
If I can jump in very quickly as well. I think it's fair to mention that refugees coming under the CRIS program will have all the benefits like any other refugees, including all their Centrelink, rental assistance, like any other refugee that comes with a humanitarian visa. So the expectation for the group is just to, as Lisa mentioned, is really providing that initial support while they're waiting for their Centrelink to kick in. But as soon as that is they start getting their benefits, they should be able to move on with their lives like any other refugee, even like similar to those who are in our HSP program.
Thanks both. So changing tack a little bit now, and this question might be best for you, Andrea. How do you deal with the dilemma of what is considered important for the client themselves in terms of the refugees and what the service provider might consider important?
Yeah, thanks, John. Look, it's a great question, and I think that there's no easy, simple answer, and a really common, I guess, tension that organisations can feel. But in terms of, I guess, what we say is best practice, I think ensuring that initiatives are community-led. So, you know, working with communities to understand, is this really relevant for them? Is this important to them? Is this something that they're going to engage with and find beneficial? Because I guess, you know, initiating something that people aren't going to benefit from, or there aren't going to be positive outcomes, it seems a bit of a waste of resourcing. And I guess also, you know, if we take that person-centered approach as well, people are the experts of their own lives. They know what they need. So I think sort of if we take that approach, it is probably in the best interest of an organisation to ensure that whatever the initiative is, that the community themselves are really sort of, you know, they're involved and they've said that this is what's important to us.
Thanks, Andrea. Well, thanks everyone. We might wrap up there, but before I do so, I just want to say I feel like we've only really scratched the surface here. And thank you all for sharing your insights, and thank you to everyone for attending, for your great questions. Clearly, we'll have to do another one soon. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Until then, stay safe and have a good week. And I'll just invite each presenter to say goodbye. So Vani, we'll start with you.
Thank you, everyone.
Lisa and Blaise.
Thank you so much for having us, Apes, and go well, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure joining you all, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.